I was packing the hospital bag when my husband said, "Don't fight me on this." Then I found our baby's name written under his dead wife's photo. I said, "Don't fight you on what?" Matt rubbed his face like I was already exhausting him. On the name. That was the moment everything in the room changed. The nursery had been warm 5 seconds before. Soft yellow lamp. Tiny clothes stacked on the rocking chair. A half-packed hospital bag open on the floor. A little white blanket my mother had washed twice because she said babies deserved things that smelled like home before they even got there. Then Matt said that sentence, and suddenly the whole room felt cold. I tried to laugh because sometimes when something hurts too fast, your body reaches for denial first. I said, "We haven't picked a name yet." He didn't laugh. He looked at the crib, then at my stomach, then back at me. We both know what name matters. I had been afraid of that sentence for weeks. I just hadn't admitted it to myself. Matt was married before me. His first wife, Grace, died years before we met. She was pregnant when it happened, and the baby didn't survive either. Their daughter was going to be named Rose. I knew that before I married him. I knew grief was part of his life. I knew I wasn't the first woman he had planned a future with. I never asked him to erase that. There was one photo of Grace in a box in the closet. Not on the wall. Not on the nightstand. Just tucked away with old cards and a hospital bracelet and a few things he only looked at on certain days. On her birthday, he would go quiet. On the anniversary, he would drive out by himself and come back with red eyes. I never made him explain. I thought that was respect. I thought giving his grief room meant it wouldn't swallow mine. When we found out I was pregnant, Matt cried harder than I did. He sat on the bathroom floor holding the test like it was made of glass. He kept saying, "Are you okay?" Even though he was the one shaking. I thought those tears were love. Maybe they were. For most of the pregnancy, he was almost perfect. He came to every appointment. He read every booklet the doctor gave us. He learned how to install the car seat before we had even bought one. He researched bottles, strollers, monitors, diapers, wipes, everything. At first, it made me feel safe. Then it started to feel like fear. If I said the baby had been quiet for an hour, he wanted to call the doctor. If I said my back hurt, he asked if we should go in. If I walked down the stairs too fast, he told me to slow down. If I wanted to drive alone, he said, "Let me take you." I tried to be patient. I knew pregnancy had opened an old wound for him. I knew he was scared of losing someone again. But somewhere between him checking the baby app every morning and asking me to text when I arrived anywhere, I started feeling less like his wife and more like something he was guarding from fate. The name issue started small. We had a list on my phone. I liked Nora, Lily, Jane, Claire, Sarah, simple names like that. Names that sounded soft but strong. Matt would look at them, nod, and say, "They're pretty." Then he would go quiet. One night, while we were eating dinner, he said, "Grace is a beautiful name." I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. I said, "It is." He looked at me carefully. It would mean a lot. I didn't answer right away. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. The sink was full of dishes. The baby was pressing under my ribs. Matt was watching me like he already knew I wouldn't say what he wanted. I said, "Mean a lot to who?" His face changed. Not anger exactly. More like pain mixed with disappointment. "To me," he said. I set my fork down. "Matt, I don't think I can name our daughter after your late wife." He looked away. I hated how cruel it sounded out loud. Your late wife. Like she was an object in the room. Like she hadn't been a real person who loved him and was loved by him. So I tried again, softer. "I respect what she meant to you. I really do. But this baby is ours." He said, "Grace was supposed to be a mother." "I know. She never got that." "I know." He looked at my stomach and said, "So why is it wrong to honor her?" That was the first time I felt something inside me go still. I said, "Because I'm her mother." He didn't say anything after that. We dropped it for the night, or I thought we did. A few days later, he tried again. This time he said, "What about Rose?" I was in bed, propped up with 3 pillows because lying flat made me feel like I couldn't breathe. He was sitting beside me with his laptop open, pretending to look at cribs even though we already had one. I said, "Rose." He nodded, too quickly. "It's simple. Classic. It doesn't have to be about anything." But it was about something. We both knew that. I said, "Matt." He closed the laptop. It was going to be her name. I know. She never got to use it. That doesn't mean our daughter has to. He stared at me. "You make it sound like I'm doing something terrible." "I'm saying our baby shouldn't be born with a memorial attached to her." He flinched like I had slapped him. Then he said the sentence I still hear when I'm alone. "You don't know what it feels like to lose a child." I went quiet. Because he was right. I didn't know. And God help me, I hoped I never would. But I was 8 months pregnant, swollen, exhausted, terrified, carrying a baby who kicked me awake at night and already felt like a whole person to me. And my husband was looking at me like my refusal to turn her into a tribute made me selfish. So I said, and you don't know what it feels like to carry a child and realize your husband is trying to give her someone else's place before she's even born. He left the room. After that, nothing was normal. He still helped. He still cooked when my back hurt. He still kissed my forehead before work. He still asked if I needed water when I shifted too much on the couch. But there was coldness under it. He wasn't cruel. That almost made it worse. Cruel would have been easier to hate. Instead, he was wounded. Quiet. Patient in a way that made me feel like he was waiting for me to become reasonable. Then his sister called. Jenna and I had always gotten along okay. Not close, not enemies. She was blunt, the kind of person who said she was just being honest right before saying something that didn't need to be said. But until then, she had never crossed a real line with me. She asked how I was feeling, then let out this careful sigh. I knew. Pregnant women develop a sixth sense for conversations that are about to turn into pressure. She said, "Can I say something without you getting upset?" I said, "That usually means I'm going to get upset." She gave a small laugh, but it died fast. Matt told me about the name. Of course he did. I leaned back against the kitchen counter and put a hand on my stomach. Okay. He's hurting, Emma. I know he is. I don't think you do. That stung. I said, I live with him, Jenna. She said, then you should understand why this matters. I closed my eyes. It matters to me too. It's just a name. That made something in me snap. I said, then why does everyone care so much? She went quiet. Then she said, because Grace and Rose mattered. I gripped the counter. I never said they didn't. But you're acting like using their names would erase you. No, I said. I'm acting like using their names would erase my daughter. She made this frustrated sound, like I was being impossible. That's dramatic. Is it? Because I'm the one carrying this baby. I'm the one who will deliver her. I'm the one who has to live with hearing people say a dead woman's name every time they call for my child. She said, you sound jealous. That word hit harder than I expected. Jealous. Of a woman who died. Of a baby who never came home. Of grief. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, I'm not jealous. I'm scared. Jenna softened a little, but not enough. He just wants a piece of them to live. And there it was. The thing everyone kept saying like it was sweet. A piece of them. Not our daughter. A piece. After that call, I cried in the laundry room because it was the only place where Matt wouldn't immediately find me. I sat on the floor beside a basket of baby clothes and tried to breathe through the tight feeling in my chest. The next week, his mother came over. Linda brought a yellow baby blanket folded perfectly in a gift bag. It was handmade, delicate, with tiny flowers stitched around the edges. It really was beautiful. I thanked her. I meant it. Then she touched the blanket and said, Grace would have loved this. I went still. Matt was standing beside her. He didn't react. Linda looked at my stomach with wet eyes and whispered, she always wanted a little girl. I waited for Matt to say something. Anything. He didn't. So I said, I'm sure she did. My voice sounded flat even to me. Linda looked hurt. I didn't mean anything bad. I said, I know. But I was tired. So tired. Tired of being careful around everyone else's pain while no one was careful with mine. Linda started crying. Matt immediately put an arm around her. And suddenly I was the villain in my own living room. After she left, Matt said, you didn't have to make that awkward. I stared at him. I made it awkward? You know what she meant. No, Matt, I know exactly what she said. She looked at my stomach and talked about what Grace wanted. He rubbed his forehead. She lost people too. And I'm trying not to lose myself. He looked confused, almost annoyed. What does that even mean? It means I feel like everyone is waiting for this baby to fix something that has nothing to do with her. He didn't answer. That was the pattern by then. I would say something true and he would go silent like silence made him kinder. The worst part happened 3 days later. I was looking for the receipt for the crib because one of the side rails was loose and I wanted to call the store before the baby came. Matt kept receipts and manuals in a folder in the desk drawer in our bedroom. I wasn't snooping. I know everyone says that, but I wasn't. I had no reason to dig for secrets. The drawer was already half open. The folder was right there. But under it was a photo. Not framed. Just lying flat. Grace. I had seen her picture before. She had a kind face. Warm smile. Brown hair tucked behind one ear. I had never hated her. I need people to understand that. I never hated her. But underneath the photo was a folded piece of paper. And on the outside, in Matt's handwriting, were the words, birth announcement. My hands went cold. I unfolded it slowly. It was typed like something he planned to send to family and friends. Our miracle has arrived. Welcome to the world, Grace Rose. I read it once. Then again. Then my vision blurred. Grace Rose. His dead wife. His dead baby. My living daughter. Not one name from our list. Not one name we had chosen together. Not one sign that I existed beyond being the body bringing her here. I sat on the edge of the bed with that paper in my hand until my legs went numb. When Matt came home, I was still there. He knew before I said anything. His eyes went to the paper, then to the open drawer, then back to me. I held it up. What is this? He dropped his keys on the dresser. Emma, what is this? It's not what you think. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. It says, "Welcome to the world, Grace Rose." What else am I supposed to think? He took a step closer. I wrote it when I was emotional. You wrote a birth announcement. I didn't send it. But you wrote it like the decision was already made. He looked away. That answer was louder than anything he could have said. I stood up slowly. My stomach felt heavy, my back ached, and my heart was beating so hard it hurt. I said, "Were you waiting until I was in labor? Is that what this was? Wait until I'm exhausted, scared, maybe drugged, and then suddenly everyone calls her Grace Rose." His face changed. No, don't make me sound like a monster. Then explain it. He looked at the floor. I thought once she was here, you'd understand. That was when something inside me broke cleanly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just clean. I said, no. You thought once she was here, I'd be too tired to fight you. He didn't deny it. He didn't. That silence told me everything. I walked to the closet and pulled out my overnight bag. He followed me, suddenly panicked. What are you doing? I'm going to Sarah's. Emma, stop. No. You're 8 months pregnant. I know exactly how pregnant I am. You can't just leave. I turned around. Watch me. His face crumpled for a second, and I almost softened. Almost. Because I loved him. That was the awful part. I loved him even while he was hurting me. He said, "You're punishing me for grieving." I zipped the bag. No. I'm protecting our daughter from being born with a job. He looked genuinely confused. A job? Yes. Heal you. Honor them. Comfort your mother. Give your sister closure. Make the past less painful. She hasn't even taken her first breath, and all of you already need something from her. He stood there, silent. I picked up the hospital bag too. That was when he said, "You're making me choose between them and you." I stopped at the bedroom door. "No, Matt," I said. "I'm asking you to choose your daughter as herself." Sarah lived across town in a small apartment with too many plants and a couch that was uncomfortable unless you were emotionally destroyed, in which case it somehow felt perfect. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just took the bags. Then I handed her the birth announcement. She read it silently. Her jaw tightened. Then she said, "I'm going to say something, and I need you to know I mean it with love. Do not go home tonight." I burst into tears. Not pretty tears. Not quiet movie tears. I cried so hard my chest hurt. Sarah helped me sit down, brought me water, and took my phone when Matt started calling over and over. The first messages were apologetic. "I'm sorry. Please come home. We need to talk." Then they changed. "You had no right to leave like that. You know what this time of year does to me. You're acting like Grace and Rose never existed." Then his mother messaged. It was long. Too long. She said grief was not simple. She said Matt had suffered more than most people could imagine. She said I was lucky enough to carry a healthy baby and should have compassion for the people who never got that chance. I read that line 3 times. Lucky enough. Like my pregnancy was a prize I had won that made my pain smaller. Sarah took the phone before I could answer. She said nope. Not while pregnant and crying on my couch. My parents came the next morning. My mother cried the second she saw me. My father didn't. He just sat in the chair across from me and asked, "Do you feel safe?" I said he wouldn't hurt me. My father nodded slowly. That's not exactly what I asked. That made me cry again. Because no, I didn't feel safe. Not physically unsafe. But emotionally? No. I didn't feel safe in my own marriage anymore. I didn't feel safe naming my own child. I didn't feel safe going into labor beside a man who might wait for my weakest moment to push his grief onto the birth certificate. My father listened quietly while I told him everything. When I was done, he said something I will never forget. That baby deserves to be born into a room where people are excited to meet her, not people waiting for her to become someone else. That sentence stayed in my chest for days. Matt came to Sarah's apartment 2 days later. I agreed to talk to him in the parking lot because I didn't want him inside. Maybe that sounds cold, but I needed the option to walk away. He looked awful. His hair was messy. His eyes were red. He looked smaller somehow, like the fight had drained the anger out of him and left only the wound. He said, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer right away. He swallowed. "I know I scared you. You didn't scare me. You made me feel invisible." His face tightened. "I never wanted that. But you did it." "I know." There was a long silence. Cars passed behind us. Somewhere nearby, someone was laughing, and it felt strange that the world could keep making normal sounds while my marriage stood there falling apart. Matt said, "When we found out it was a girl, something happened to me. I thought I was fine. I thought I had accepted everything. Then suddenly I started seeing all the things I lost. I nodded because I believed him. That was the painful part. I believed his grief was real. I believed he loved Grace. I believed he loved Rose. I believed the pregnancy had opened a door inside him he thought was locked. But pain being real doesn't mean it gets to run the house. He said, I just wanted a piece of them to live. I looked down at my stomach. Our daughter shifted under my hand, one slow push like she was reminding me she was there. I said, she is not a piece of them. He started crying then. Not loud. Just tears slipping down his face while he tried to keep standing straight. I know, he whispered. I wanted to hug him so badly it hurt. Then he said, what if we don't use Grace? What if we just use Rose as the middle name? And just like that, I stepped back. His face fell. I said, you still don't understand. I'm trying. No. You're negotiating. He wiped his face. It's just the middle name. I almost laughed because I had heard that from everyone by then. Just a name. Just a middle name. Just a tribute. Just grief. Just peace. Just let him have this. I said, if it's just a middle name, why are you crying in a parking lot asking for it? He didn't answer. I said, you don't want a name. You want relief. He closed his eyes. And I can't give you our daughter as medicine. That was the climax, I think. Not the birth announcement. Not the fight. That moment. Standing in a parking lot with my husband crying in front of me while I finally understood the truth. He was not trying to hurt me. But he was willing to hurt me if it meant touching his past again. And that scared me more than anger would have. I told him I wasn't coming home until we had help. He nodded, but I could tell he hated it. I said his family was no longer part of any naming conversation. No opinions, no pressure, no guilt messages, no blankets with hidden meaning, no Grace would have loved this, no Rose deserves to live on. Nothing. He said, my mother is grieving too. I said, then she needs support. Not my baby. He looked away. I told him he needed to speak to someone before the birth. I wasn't saying it to insult him. I meant it. He needed help. This was bigger than me, bigger than a name, bigger than one fight. He asked, are you leaving me? I said, I don't know. That was the truth. It hurt him. I saw it. But I couldn't comfort him by lying. He asked, what's her name then? I put both hands on my stomach. I had chosen a name in my heart weeks before, but I had been afraid to say it because every name had become a battlefield. I said, Jane. He blinked. Jane. I nodded. Simple. Hers. Nobody's ghost. Nobody's replacement. Just Jane. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. For the first time, he didn't. He just nodded once and said, Jane is a good name. I cried after he left. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. But because for one small second, my daughter existed out loud without being tied to anyone dead. A week later, Matt started seeing a doctor. He also agreed to counseling with me. I didn't move back home right away. I stayed with Sarah until the birth because I needed peace more than I needed appearances. His family did not take it well. Jenna sent one message saying I had one. I didn't answer. Linda sent another message saying she hoped one day I would understand what it meant to lose a daughter. I blocked her after that. I know grief makes people say ugly things, but I was done being a soft place for everyone else's pain while pregnant. Matt didn't defend those messages at first. That almost ended us. When I told him that, he finally called his mother and sister and told them to stop. I wasn't there for the conversation, but Sarah was sitting beside me when he texted afterward. I told them Jane is our daughter's name. I told them no one is allowed to argue about it again. I stared at that message for a long time. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase what happened. But it was the first time he chose the baby in the present instead of the ghosts in the past. 3 weeks later, I went into labor at 2 a.m. I called Matt because despite everything, I wanted him there. He arrived at the hospital with shaking hands and a face full of fear, but he did not mention names. Not once. During labor, he was quiet and steady. He held my hand. He got ice chips. He told me I was doing great even when I told him to stop talking. He cried when our daughter was born. But this time, the crying felt different. Not like he was seeing someone return. Like he was meeting someone new. The nurse asked for her name a little while later. I looked at Matt. That moment felt huge. Bigger than anyone else in the room knew. He looked at our daughter, then at me, and said, her name is Jane. Just Jane. And I broke. I cried harder than I had during labor. Maybe from relief. Maybe from exhaustion. Maybe because I had spent weeks fighting for my daughter's right to arrive as herself, and finally someone else said it too. Jane. Our daughter. Not Grace. Not Rose. Not a second chance. Not a living memorial. Just Jane. The aftermath has been quiet, but not simple. Matt and I are still in counseling. I moved back home when Jane was 2 weeks old, but with boundaries I never thought I'd have to set in my own marriage. His mother hasn't met Jane yet. That sounds harsh, and maybe it is, but I told Matt she can meet her when she can look at her without turning her into someone else. Jenna apologized, but it was one of those apologies that still had a little blame tucked inside it. I'm sorry if I made you feel pressured. I didn't fight her on it. I just said, thank you, and left it there. Matt has been trying. I'll give him that. He removed Grace's photo from the desk drawer, not because I asked him to throw it away, but because he realized keeping it beside the fake birth announcement had crossed a line. He put the photo back in the memory box. He told me he doesn't want to erase them, but he understands now that Jane cannot be their echo. Some days, I believe we'll make it. Other days, I look at him holding Jane and wonder if grief will always be somewhere in the room with us. But then there are small moments. He calls her Janie when she yawns. He laughs when she makes angry little fists in her sleep. He tells her, you're your own girl, like he's reminding himself too. And maybe that's enough for today. I don't hate Grace. I don't hate Rose. I never did. I hate that for a while, everyone treated my daughter like a bridge to them instead of a person walking toward her own life. I hate that I had to leave my home while pregnant to make people understand that. I hate that the hardest part of becoming a mother was not labor, or fear, or sleepless nights. It was convincing my husband that our living daughter did not owe her name to the dead. So now I'm sitting here with Jane asleep on my chest, typing this with one hand, still unsure how people will judge me. Maybe some people will say I was cruel. Maybe some will say a middle name would have been harmless. Maybe some will say grief made Matt act in ways he never would have otherwise. Maybe all of that is true. But when my daughter opens her eyes, I don't see a replacement. I don't see a tribute. I don't see a second chance for a story that ended before mine began. I see Jane. And I fought for that. So was I wrong for refusing to let my husband name our daughter after his dead wife and baby, even if it was the only thing he thought would help him heal?